Good day, everybody. Today's discussion is about a much fraught topic, which is about the slowness of combat in Dungeons and Dragons. It was prompted by a comment on Profession Dungeon Master's channel, whereby a group of his school children um, who played with him went to a convention, went to do some Dungeons and Dragons games, and complained that what took 5 minutes under Professor DM took 50 minutes in for a single combat in D&D. And it is true that over the years, Dungeons and Dragons has become much slower, especially since third edition, and even I think from the first edition for higher levels. Now there are many homebrews that can speed it up. I mean, Professor DM is famous for his homebrews, but I think he's kind of effectively hybrid to the point of it being a new system. And I think this illustrates what's often called the Oberami fallacy, that if there's a flaw in a game system, just homebrew it. Now, there are certainly um, perfect system with a bad DM or indecisive players will always be slow. Um, but there's certainly a better system can encourage and guide the M's to be firm and can encourage players to be decisive. The two have to fit together. And I think it's a fallacy that Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition can be homebrewed to be um, fairer, better, more balanced, and quicker. I don't think it can be, and I don't think it can be because of systemic problems in its system. Its math and its resolution systems are the problem. You can't make a fixed system 5e compatible because the math is broken, as I hope to demonstrate. And there are 9 or 10 or so main problems that I've identified in the system and means of speeding it up. Some of which can be done as homebrew on any system, but I think if you put them all together, from my experience, they work synergetically. Okay, let's go on to the issue of hit point bloat. I'm going to use the ancient red dragon or equivalent because in different editions of D&D, sometimes called the oldest red dragon, an elder dragon, or a great worm. So it's the oldest dragon for which you get a stat block. I'm start with second edition because second edition was really a tidy up of first edition, and the only real major changes were with hit points were for some monsters, notably giants that were palpably underpowered. For example, red giants went up from 8 to I think 11 hit dice, which is more realistic. But in second edition, an ancient red dragon, the most powerful, 172, a mid-range dragon had 60s. So um, when the bloke began in third edition, carried through 3.5, no real change to monster scaling there. It goes up by more than 3.5 times to the 600s. I think the reason for that was because higher level players had multi attacks. But we'll talk about multi attacks in a minute. Fourth edition, it doubled. Quite why it doubled, I don't know. And I think they admitted they made a mistake because in fourth edition Essentials, respectively 4.5 edition, Jeremy Crawford, who wrote the Monster Essentials, and Mark Wells, who edited it, rescaled everything almost exactly 60%. I often say, if you're home brewing, you can reduce it by 50 or 60% fourth edition, and you'll get something reasonable. So that was good. Fifth edition, they decreased it again, but it was not quite clear because particularly 5th.5 edition, they didn't include any rules for designing monsters. So quite where this 507 comes from is difficult. Now 500 hit points. How many hits with a long sword without bonuses is that going to take? And how high do the bonuses have to be to make a difference over a reasonable combat length of 5 or 6 rounds? What is a tank doing in such a fight? Are they just there to swamp out hit points, having almost no chance to do any serious damage? And this leads on to a few other points. How, but let's start with solving the squish point bloat, because the squish point bloat, if mathematically you at typical damage levels you have a fight lasting 20 rounds, that's just ridiculous. So I think in my own system, which is Shatterheart and its starter set, like Shadow Dark, but with tactics, which is a simplified version of the Shadow Dark system. Basically, the starting point is to fix all the bad math in Dungeons and Dragons. Better dungeons, better dragons. So it recalibrates to roughly 2E levels. So an adult red dragon will have just under 70 squish points, we call them. And a great worm, which is the oldest red dragon, which gets 20 hit dice, will have just over two. Will have 200 exactly, actually, because they use a D20. Dragons use a D20 dice. So there's a clear formula based on the skull rating of monsters, and different monsters have different types of dice. So the more glass cannon, um, dry and bony monsters like undead, and weaker ones like plants use D8, monstrosities, aberrations use D10, dragons use D20, and so on and so forth. And animals and other creatures depends on their size. Um, this gives monsters fewer hit points, and remember, in this system, most cannot critically hit, but as normal, they hit for much higher damage. For example, um, a huge monster might hit for plus 20, 20, 25, 30 damage on top of their base damage. Every hit just from the sheer size of their natural weapons, especially at higher skull ratings. So monsters are easier to bring down, and player characters do more bonus damage as well and crit more often, but they hit hard, so you better darn well bring them down quickly, because there's a real risk of losing against higher level monsters. The second related point is I've never seen it commented on, but if you've got that tank warrior, I get paralyzed because the saving throw against paralysis and almost everything else doesn't scale with level. An uneven use of attributes as well. Intelligence gets used all the time. A lot of other attributes like strength hardly ever gets used. So in the Shatterhot system, there are 4 attributes: beef, jock, geek, and riz, and each of those have a saving throw related to them, where you add your attribute bonus and you add your level proficiency bonus, and that gives you your total bonus. So let's say we had a warrior with +3 beef. He's 5th level. Starts off at 0 at level 1, proficiency bonus. Level 2 gets +1. Level 5 gets +2. So if he has 3 beef, then that gives him +5 um, saving throw bonus on beef. Um, and if you get knocked out, then the damage per round, it should be rather than damage per second, damage per round, or it's the same thing, um, really falls for martial classes, especially. Martial classes are just not viable against high level monsters, in my view. Out of the box, you have to use weird and stupid multi-class or subclass abilities to be able to do anything at all. Um, no heroic swing of the sword, and I think that's just bad design. And this leads on to our next point. Uh, high armor classes reduce the damage. Sorry, should be damage per round um, too much. Now, 19 is the Ancient Red Dragon armor class. So, well, that's designed to be hit by levels 15 and above. But let's say it was a level 11 uh, uh, warrior in Dungeons and Dragons. Sorry, 10th level warrior. Now, um, in my system, um, the hit chances against creatures depend on an avoid rating. It's the same as evasion in um, in some other systems. Um, and what this does is you subtract your avoid from sorry, you add your avoid to the hit to the to hit or to strike TS rating, or as it's called, or TS spellcast if it's an aimed spell. Um, and bigger monsters are easier to hit. Tinier monsters are harder to hit. Monsters with high jock and high skull rankings are harder to hit. So let's do a calculation here against the Great Worm. 10th level warrior plus 4 beef. They'd have a brawn with their level, which is their saving value number, total plus 7. So that gives them a strike of plus 9 with a single handed weapon, but they got plus 2 expert skill, so it's plus 7, so they hit 65% of the time, even though they are mid-level, and this is a high-level dragon. So this is the kind of encounter that's probably going to scare these monsters to players to death. Probably have to parlay or find some trickery or just escape. Probably not going to win, but at least they stand a chance of hitting it. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, the chance of one chance in 10 of hitting it. Now dragons are not hard to hit. They have thick skin, so the solution here is to introduce ablative armor. Now, here, I assume in the Shatterheart system, you don't automatically on a plus two to strike weapon get plus 2 damage. We have a rune system, so you have to have either smashing or crushing runes to do damage. So a plus 2 smashing rune would give a weapon category of 6. The Ancient Dragon as an armor class of 9, which is the second highest in the game, special plus damage, and that means automatically 0. -3 is 0 damage. Whoops! So even though you've hit this dragon, you aren't quite high enough level or have powerful enough magic to do it any damage. Is that the end of the world? Well, again, the system is tuned to allow for this. You can focus powers and abilities to um, either reduce its armor category or do extra damage irrespective of its armor category. For example, many class skills, class abilities, such as Mark Quarry for Rangers or Smite for um, paladins or enrage berserk for um, barbarians, they do plus extra d6s of damage or even d8s if they specialize in those areas through abilities, um, over and above, irrespective, even if you do no damage normally, these are extra damage, extra force damage. Now the warrior doesn't have access to these, but they can use a penetrating strike ability, and as can all martial abilities, which reduces armor class to 0. If it's special armor, it reduces by 3, which means it does 1d7 damage bonuses, and in the game, beef always adds bonus damage, level adds bonus damage, and skill adds bonus damage. So that'd be 1d10 plus 9. So this is a good lesson, I think, from 13th age. You need to scale damage better with level. Um, And there is a Sunder armor ability which is unique to warriors, where outlaws, which are rogues, can cut off your shield, can cut off your armor. They can't do it with natural armor, whereas warriors uniquely can. They have a Sunder armor ability, which is basically to chop off permanently. For a successful hit, you reduce the armor class by 2, even if you only do a normal hit and they're scoring 0 damage. So a couple of those, even an ancient red dragon with 9 armor class, you're down to 6, no 5. You're doing damage. So, and this leads us on to the next point. Multiple attacks. They were added in 3.5 edition. A lot of DMs homebrew it by rolling everything together, even at the party all at once. I think you rolling the party all at once is a mistake, because you don't have the tactical to and fro. Oh, I missed, I'll try and hit with a sneak attack because they moved and have made themselves off guard or whatever. Um, so in Shatterheart, there's only ever one attack per turn. You can add abilities to your attack to do extra effects, extra damage. You could do a cleave, for example, or smash mob, where you damage everybody within 1 grid square of you. And instead of multiple attacks, we have scaled damage. So you have a degree of success system with a much higher chance of crits, and those crits do more damage. So let's have a look at that on the next slide. Critical hits have always been weak in D&D. Remember, until the latest edition, I think they weren't even a main rule. They were always an optional rule. I don't think they really liked them. Jeremy Crawford tried to get rid of them for spells. That went down like a dead duck. Only the base damage multiplies. Bonus damage from strength, etc. Never been a gamist or simulationist reason for that. Some weapons in third edition had an increased chance of doing a critical. Pathfinder kind of carries that on by doing what they call deadly damage, which is extra damage after doing the critical multiplier. Instead, they've done an extra chance of doing crits. I think at 20th level, you can, if you're a fighter, you can warrior 18, 19, 20. That's good. That's repeated in Shatterheart, but also you have these things like longbows and great swords and long swords do extra deadly damage. And the solution is to link to a degree of success system. Like in Pathfinder, if you roll 10 over your chance of success, you get a critical, or it raises the critical level by 1. So if it's 10 over and a natural 20, that's raising the critical level to 2. In Shatterheart, if it's 5 or more over, per 5 it raises by 1, natural 20 it raises by another 1. So if you hit, let's say you hit 10 over and a natural 20, that's double, triple, quadruple damage. And there is an escalation dice system in Shatterheart, like 13th Age. So if it was the 6th round, it goes up to +5 on the 7th round, +6, and once you got to +5, you're automatically critting a level high. You're doing double damage in effect. So this is a good way of heightening the tension. At first, mods you're going to be knocked around. You're wise not to spend too much focus points on attack. Spend them on defense. When the escalation dice, you use abilities to strip away armor. Then you try and maximize your crits. Use abilities that give you edge, which is advantage, and special abilities such as go for the weak spot, ranges, which really try to put an end to monsters. And also group abilities like in Shatterheart, there's a near miss system where if you miss by one or two, one of the next party member in the initiative order gets an extra focus point, so you have to spend on that target. That is, the monsters just open them out. It's a miss with opportunities in Powered by the Apocalypse terms, and you have near misses, critical misses, etc., all of which affect the narrative and affect the to and fro of combat. Most monsters do not crit, they just have big claws. They don't give them advantage on penetrating into critical organs. Some monsters with weapons like orcs have the brutal characteristic, which means they can crit. They have big, sharp, pointy weapons, much feared as a result. Okay, and the next reason is something that affects every system, not just Dungeons and Dragons. That's lack of player coordination. People arguing about initiative order. Um, I think simple on this is to have a blitz clock, which applies to the party. And once the blitz clock is down, you can apply penalties such as lose one focus point. Or can't use abilities or whatever, um, or you just are defeated, you retreat. um, um, Certainly, there should be no argument about. I mean, I allow players to choose their initiative order because they might have tactics about that. But if they haven't decided, I say, okay, player on the left first, then the next player on the right, just go around in a circle, and basically um, players choose an initiative order by placing themselves around the table. That way, you don't need to use any initiative markers. So I got that from Runehammer. Um, Similar system. Another system I got from Professor DM is the party moves together. That is, they have to decide a plan and just move, and then I resolve in initiative order the attacks. So there is an opportunity for people later in the initiative order to respond to what's happened earlier, and I do allow for delayed actions. Or part of a turn, for example, a move, I allow it, like in Baldur's Gate, to split it so they can. You might have a front row, a barbarian, and a warrior that goes straight at the enemy, and then the rogue takes a half move and says, "Look, I'll do my half move and engage, depending on what happens with the first fighter and barbarian. One might get killed, in which case it'd be wasted movement, so I go to the next one, or I go around the back, or I do a sneak attack through distraction because it's two people attacking, etc. So that works quite well. Also, there is the ability to, if you're splitting movement like that, just to swipe at an enemy and continue your movement. So I say, unless you're delaying part of a move action, I say, say where you're going to go, because a monster might have an ability to take a reaction, opportunity attack, what's called a rejoinder in the system. They might have the sentinel ability, which stops someone in their tracks if an opportunity attack succeeds. So you can't determine the all movement until and of course there's lots of abilities that might stop movement, such as monsters knocking you flying and so on. So, but most of the time, you move, but and your move badump is underlined by the fact that If you shoot or you spellcast, your movement ends. That's a really important rule because um, it helps simplify and speed up the game in that your movement most of the time is move, badump, attack. It also gets rid of the game completely unrealistic mechanics like somebody leaping out from cover, shooting, and leaping back. This is Hollywood, but it's unrealistic. Somebody has to be really highly skilled at that, and in that you can only do that if you have special skills. Outlaws at medium to higher levels have these skills. They have a skill called evade, which means they can, if they're in darkness, they can jump out from cover, sneak attack, and jump back. Where did that come from? So I think there's and if these are designed with the game, it really adds synergy bonuses, and it really does speed up combat. Let's look at the next one, player indecision. Again, try to simplify things. Got rid completely of the greatest monstrosity in 5th edition, 5.5 edition, of bonus actions. We talked about movement, so really the only thing people have to decide on in their move is what action they take. They're probably going to attack or spellcast, and in the game, at least in its starter edition, at a simplified move plus action with ability action economy. So they have one attack action, and they can have one ability that they spend focus points on enhancing that action or giving them defensive bonuses such as dodging and so on. And that encourages decisions off turn because really this is the one decision people have to take. And another rule is one attack, heal, prayer, or aid per turn. So even though underlying this is the mechanics of a three action economy in the full set or a simplified two action economy in the main set, in the starter set, you can only do one of those per turn, but it does allow, crucially, otherwise these classes should not exist, support classes to do a support action as well as either a move action or an attack action. So, for example, you have a cleric. Um, they're not moving. They're in melee, but they're also praying, and that prayer can be an aid, or it can be a heal, or it can be focused on increasing damage against a religious enemy. There's several different prayers in the game, different ones for paladins, different ones for clerics, and they really improve the viability of clerics. People have got used to I think, in in Baldur's Gate to clerics for doing healing as a bonus action. If you get rid of bonus actions, then this is the way to do it. You just say my additional ability I'm doing as well as my attack or my move is prayer of healing. Simple. Um, and similarly, bards can do things like battle marches. Battle marches they play, but they can also cast spells using another performance skill, such as dance or sing, or vice versa. They could be singing a battle march while playing and performing um, uh, performing a battle march through singing, performing, and then casting a spell using their harmony magic. So this really enhances and increases the narrative oomph of support classes. And some classes um, like outlaws, which are rogues, really there's all kinds of interesting combinations they can do, combining actions with acrobatics or with magic and all kinds of things to catch their opponents off guard, so they're not just slugging weakly with daggers. Okay. As I said, it's one roll system. Always reuse the first roll. If you're doing a roll at the beginning of your turn, that roll is reused throughout the whole of your turn. When you pick up your d20, your turn is over. Um, and this is uh, really important. All saving throws, which are called resist rolls in this game, um, if you've got a persistent condition, such as on fire or something like that, or poisoned, doing poison damage or paralysis, anything really, driven mad through confusion, you roll your resist rolls at the beginning of your turn, but they always last one turn. So they last one turn, and then the beginning of that turn, we use a countdown dice system for this. You can make your resist roll, and if you pass your resist roll, you can then use that roll in your attack. So let's say you need 12 to overcome a stunned condition. You roll 13. Aha! You can use that 13 as your attack roll. Your stun condition has ended. If that isn't enough to do damage, you might say, "Okay, I'm going to dodge." You got yourself out of a hole. If your roll is not enough to end the stun condition, your turn ends. It's as simple as that. So I think this is a very neat way of simplifying and reducing your rolls. You see the roll on the table, and often you can think tactically, what can I do with that? What can I do with that? Okay, and finally, lack of morale rules. Um, Now, up until third edition, there was rules for morale. If monsters failed them, they would run away, as most monsters, unless they're especially ferocious, like a giant honey badger, um, will keep on fighting. And of course, it's in the nature of certain monsters, such as kobolds and goblins, to ambush, be very ferocious, but if things turn against them, elegantly retreat. Not cowardice, it's just they're clever. They want to fight another day. They don't fight almost to the death because of their ferocity, like orcs. It doesn't mean they're stupid, it just means, well, sometimes their adrenaline overtakes their brains. Um, and so each monster has a ferocity value. There's no point in giving one to players because it's entirely up to player characters how brave or otherwise or foolhardy they want to be. Um, Okay, so thank you for this. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you do go over to itch.io or shatterheart.com and have a look at the entirely free starter set there. Start playing that, and you can go to the Shatterheart full website. It'll soon be on itch.io, and download the monsters, the spells, the equipment. All of these extra assets aren't in the starter set, but you can use any of the assets from the full set you wish without any rule amendments whatsoever. Thank you very much. See you again soon.